My name is Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today, and we're here today with Mimi Fox. I'm really honored that you're here. This is really, really great. Your playing is stupefying um, in a lot of ways. There's no question about it. You play jazz. There's no doubt about that. But there's so many elements of classical guitar in your technique, which you do with a hybrid. You do it with the pick and your fingers and all of that, rather than a classical drape or whatever. But I mean, the counterpoint and the moving voices and all of that you put into your solo playing is right out of the classical playbook, if you will. And then obviously the harmonies and everything that you're utilizing are right out of, jazz, typical, but traditional jazz harmonies, but in your own style. And the thing that strikes me about your playing is the precision. I mean, you really have some chops, girl.
Bob, thank you.
You really do. It's like, I mean, the precision is tremendous. And not only that,
Bob, you got to stop sooner. I feel like my head's going to explode.
well, it's okay. You deserve it. So I'm gonna keep going for just a minute. So I'm listening, and I'm a big guy for time. I listen to time a lot. It's one thing to play in time or be on tempo. Oh, I'm banging the table. But if you play, if you're playing a blues and you're playing a little bit behind and all of that, there's a precision in the behind. You're not just behind, you're precisely behind. And if you're hitting a something that's swinging, you're precisely ahead. I mean, everything is very, very precise with you, very precision. Are you aware of that? Is that something you shoot for, or is it just in you?
I was doing a show up in Seattle a few years ago, and I had a drummer who was in the audience, and I was doing a solo guitar show, and he came up and he mentioned that. He talked about my time and how it just seemed like no matter what I was doing, even like if I was doing a long rubato phrase, that even the internal time was very
Exactly.
precise.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't, it sounds sort of, I don't know, I don't want it to sound like false modesty to say I don't think about it, but I think because, Bob, if you know a little bit about my history, drums were my first instrument. And I think some of my my earliest jazz influences were drummers like Art Blakey and Elvin Jones and Max Roach. And drums was really what got me into jazz. It was my dad's old jazz recordings, and I, played along on my mom's soup pots when I was like 8, 9 years old, and so I think, and I played drums for many, many years. Really, it wasn't until I came to California in 1980 that I stopped playing drums professionally because I couldn't. I got very serious about jazz guitar at that point, and I couldn't be a servant of two masters, if you will.
Yeah.
I made the choice.
Well, that makes sense. I did not know. I apologize. I did not know
no, it's okay.
you were a
It's okay.
drummer, but that makes a lot of sense to me because your timing is so spot on. And you're playing. We'll talk a little bit about your solo playing versus your versus your ensemble playing. I've seen you play with small group, organ trio and that kind of thing. But you're playing a lot, with just yourself, acoustic guitar, and I've seen you do things obviously with your Heritage. Is that a 535? Just parenthetically.
The one that I have is my signature model from Heritage.
Okay.
Now, I did have I came on board with Heritage in 1991, so I do have a 575, what I call my Road Warrior. This is my Heritage signature model.
I love it.
Yeah, I always tell my students that.
Pull it up a little bit. Let me see what you got there.
Okay.
Dual pickup, trapeze tailpiece.
Ebony.
Love it. Ebony fingerboard. Yeah.
Spruce top.
Gorgeous.
And I always tell my students, Bob, the most important reason for playing the guitar and getting good is so you can have your name on the guitar.
It sounds better. It just sounds better if it's got your name on it. So yeah. So you're playing a lot of solo guitar. Now I'm going to ask you the blunt question on that one.
Yeah, sure.
Is that because you don't have to worry about anybody else when you go on the road, or?
I think it's a combination of different factors. One is that I love solo guitar. I feel very privileged to wear the, to have the whatever moniker, to inhabit, to be called, to be thought of as a solo jazz guitarist. It's a title I take very seriously, and it means a lot to me. I love it. I love the challenge of it,
Hmm.
and I love that it demands so much of me, both mentally and musically, you know,
Hmm.
and emotionally for that matter. Because when there isn't a rhythm section, if there's no one else with you, you are not just, you have to provide that the rhythm section, as it
Right.
were, walking bass lines, holding the time together, whatever, percussive effects. But beyond that, you're also having to hold the whole show together, or a whole recording together.
Right.
And so it's very demanding, emotionally and energetically, because
Hmm.
you can't rely on the drummer to be hitting you back with stuff, and then have a piece be elevated by that. You have to create all of the moods yourself when you're playing solo. So I love the challenge of it. There's a certain freedom. A lot of people, will find solo guitar restrictive in some ways, because in order to have the piece be cohesive, or for that matter, coherent to the listener, um, you know, you have to, you feel inclined to, like, oh, I better walk a bass line for a while here so everyone knows where I am, if you get too out or too esoteric. But for me, there's a freedom in it that, you don't have to worry about a rhythm section, or cueing somebody, or saying, hey guys, I'm going to go to the bridge now, I'm going to do this. You can just decide on at the moment, well, yeah, I think I'm going to take off here from the B section, or whatever. You have, there's a lot of freedom, and there's a lot of potential in that. And there's risk in it, because there's nobody to there's no if you have a great rhythm section that you're playing with, it's like you're floating on top of a cloud.
Hmm.
It's an extraordinary experience, and I've been very lucky to play with some incredible rhythm sections, and that's something I love to do too. But yeah, coming back to what you said, Bob, I mean, solo guitar certainly is something that I love. But yes, also over the years, I have found that, when I do a lot of solo guitar concerts, and I've been part of, different tours where there'll be different solo guitarists in different genres, as part of like a great guitars kind of evening package. So promoters are able to do that, and then that's something that, obviously, financially, it's a good thing. It's a good thing if you can do that, to be able to do that and have that. I also found that when I was first touring a lot years ago, that my manager at the time that I had, Ed, worked so hard to find good rhythm sections for me in various cities, and a lot of times it worked out great. But uh, as when if I was playing in, a smaller town, it might
Hmm.
be problematic, and I might then I started. Ed and I used to laugh about this, Bob, but I would say I called my life rhythm section roulette, or roulette, because I felt like, I'm not sure how to. It's actually pronounced roulette or roulette. It's French, so I don't know if it's roulette. But anyway, I felt like, like I might be in one city, and the bass player would be swinging and burning and absolutely great, but the drummer fell out of a funk band and couldn't swing to save his life, and I would be like, oh my God. And so these things can happen. It's something I talk. Henry Johnson, who you might know, who's an incredible player and a dear friend of mine, also a heritage artist. Henry won't do it. He told me, he said he respects me for doing it, but to do pick up rhythm sections, but that it's hard, and the music suffers because of that. So from my perspective, if I'm going to be somewhere where this is what started happening as part of how I got my solo playing really together, is that, rather than take a chance on an uncertainty of how the rhythm section would be, I would just started to do more and more solo shows. So
Hmm.
it was sort of a combination of things, but I certainly wouldn't do it if I didn't love it.
You also moved to an acoustic guitar, you
Well, for
know,
this last project,
yeah,
yes.
flat top guitar, and as opposed to an arch top guitar, you know. So tell us about that. Why did you? Because we're making an effort to let jazz players and people that aspire to play jazz say, it's cool to play a flat top guitar. That
Yeah.
a lot of
Well,
people.
I always have, and it's funny because when I first started playing jazz, jazz guitar,
Hmm.
I didn't have a hollow body. I didn't have a hollow body yet. So I was, in fact, I have an old Guild, and I might
I
pull
saw
it.
that, like a
Yeah,
D25 or something like that.
no, it's a
D35,
it's a D30.
D30.
I think, or an F30. I don't know. Now you're getting me confused. Let's see. It might be Bob. It might be the F30, but in any event,
F30 is a big body guitar.
yeah. But you wait till you see. Yeah, no, it's not that. But it's very chewed up. I'll show you. But I mean, you can see the places where I just totally
I ate it up.
smashed the hell out of it because I was trying to play West Montgomery lines on this old flat top, and so for me. But see, I've always loved acoustic guitar, and
Yeah.
I studied classical guitar for a few years before I got into jazz. Before I moved to California, I studied classical guitar for several years, and
Hmm.
so and I revere that music, Bob. I revere it.
Hmm.
I've had the opportunity. I've been privileged to play with a number of chamber orchestras over the years, and so I work hard on that music. Bach, Vivaldi, all of it. Mozart. I mean, it's beautiful music, and so I think all of that for me, the acoustic guitar, it's the instrument that I started on too, and so for me, it's sort of another part of my musical personality, if you will.
You know the bravery that you have. If you're not aware of it, I'll make you aware of it. I don't know if you've ever flown an airplane or not, small airplanes or piloted a plane or not.
Oh yes, I've been on puddle jumpers.
Okay,
Yes.
then you know. All right, so playing bass is the instrument that I think about. But it's solo guitar, but in particularly classical guitar. You're playing jazz, and you open with a couple of bars of this, a couple of bars of that, and you decide you're going to play this, you're going to play that, and you decide, I'm just going to sit out here because I dig what the bass player's doing, dig what the drummer's doing. But when you're by yourself, in classical, in specific, I think you know where I'm going with this. Once it's wheels up, you got to keep flying. You got to keep going. And so, and particularly in classical, because those melodies,
Right.
they have to be executed.
Right.
People won't know. I mean, you understand where I'm going with that.
Yes.
So
Although it's true,
yeah,
if you're playing a piece like Donna Lee and you call it, at a New
yeah,
York tempo,
yeah,
you gotta nail those notes too.
yeah. You got, well, that exactly. You're exactly right. Um, so I get the point, but I'm just saying it takes a lot of bravery to do that, because to put a program together like that, people
Yeah.
need to understand that once you start, you can't stop until it's
You're
done.
committed. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
committed. But I mean, that's absolutely true. I don't think, I mean, personally, my feeling about so much great chamber music, classical music is sort of a misnomer, but chamber music in general, you know, initially that music was also meant to be improvised on. So
right.
it became codified, over
Hmm.
time. But I can imagine a private party with some rich patrons, saying to, Mozart, Wolfgang, play it the way you did last week at the other party.
Yeah,
Play it
right,
just that way.
right. Yeah, isn't that fine? I talk about that a little bit, because that's true that the original guys, they improvised, and Mozart in particular.
Right.
And today it's like, if you don't have it note for note the way that blah 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 blah, you're doing it wrong, and I'm going,
Right.
oh, that's not exactly what they had in mind back in the day.
Right.
So you're obviously aware of that. How does that affect your
Well,
own playing?
for example, when I played one time, I did the Vivaldi concerto in D major with this chamber orchestra, and each segment goes around twice. There's
Hmm.
three parts to it. In the first segment, the first movement, I played it pretty much as was written.
Hmm.
But the second time we go around, what I did was I analyzed the harmonic structure, I analyzed the chordal structure, and then I improvised the second time around. And the first time I did it, the conductor was cool because they were like, they understood where I was coming from, and they were cool and they loved jazz. But I turned around and I saw the guys in the cello section, and they looked like they were going to have a heart attack. But they were just like completely freaked out,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
no, it's not in their lexicon.
No,
that's not
but
what.
I mean, I knew that everything I was doing was logical. It all made sense because
Hmm.
I had analyzed the chordal structure.
I
This
love
is a
that.
1-6-2-5. I don't care if it's
Right.
Vivaldi or Rogers and Hart. It's still a
Right.
165.
I love that. So you studied with one of my favorite people, Bruce Morman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now let's talk about that a little bit about how you got to know Bruce and
Well, when I moved, yeah, when I first moved to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, which was, as I mentioned to you, was in 1980, I remember hearing Bruce a few times at a club and then at a festival. And at that point, in fact, it was Bruce the one that told me, because I was still playing drums. I was still doing gigs where I was playing guitar and then sometimes drums and going back and forth. And it was Bruce that said to me, Mimi, you've got talent. He said, but you can't. He said, you got to choose, girl. You cannot be a servant of two masters. It was Bruce that said that to me.
yeah.
And then I had an accident. I was also a long distance runner, and I had a running injury that screwed up my kick drum foot. And that was,
Oh,
I mean, I think I would have chosen guitar anyway because, that's my composing instrument. And,
sure.
so, but that once I had that injury, that was it. So I mean, I still have a drum set in my living room that I kick around on, Bob, but I can't, I had no, at that point, I realized Bruce was right. And if I loved jazz guitar, when I heard Bruce, what really turned me on was the mixture of blues and bebop and the intensity and passion of his playing. And I had always been a passionate player, but I didn't know what this jazz language was about. And I was
Right.
just starting to dip my feet, just get my feet wet. So, Bruce was great. I remember I approached him after a gig and he said, well, I don't really give regular lessons, but come see me and I'll give you a whole bunch of stuff. So I would see him periodically because he wasn't the type of guy to do weekly lessons. And he would give me so much stuff that it's a good thing because he'd give me
Hmm.
like 6 months of material and then I'd see him, or a year's worth of material and different things to work on. But mostly he turned me on to transcribing. And also he was very supportive of my playing. And I think just like when I had the one very long lesson, many hour lesson with Joe Pass, whenever you have someone that you look up to and admire and they compliment your playing, that goes a long way.
You
That
know,
goes a
it's
long way.
it's funny that you mentioned Joe Pass because I'm about to mention him. It's surprising isn't the right word. I don't have the right word, but it's notable that so many people that I talk to like this have had that night in the hotel room with Joe Pass, or I came
Mm-hmm.
to his house, or he was
Mm-hmm.
there, that kind of thing. And it was one of the guys that I spoke with. His time with Joe Pass, Paul Bolenbach, I believe.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
know. Paul's great.
yeah, Paul said that Joe said, he said, well, how much is it going to cost? He says, go down a corner and give me a box of these cigars.
You know what? I'm gonna hang on 1 second.
Oh,
This is the box.
oh my goodness gracious.
Yes. Dunhill English Claro Selección Suprema Macanudo.
And yeah, those the
This
Mac
is the
Daddies.
very box
And
that and Joe pocketed the cigars. I mean, he was on the road, so he didn't want to schlep this. He took the
uh,
cigars out and he said, "You want this, Mimi?" I said, "Yes, I do."
so you paid for your lesson with cigars, or he just gave you a box? You
No,
paid
no,
for your
no, no, no,
lesson.
no,
You
no.
paid for
I
your
bought him
lesson.
the box.
You bought him a box.
I bought him the box, and that's all he wanted. He didn't want money. He just wanted me to
Yeah,
get him some
give me a
cigars.
box of cigars. Well, Paul told me, he said, I didn't realize how much that box of cigars cost. And he said,
Well,
I didn't have the money. He said, I didn't have the
well,
money.
what was really nice is that Joe gave me the box, so now he's gone, but I feel
You
like I
got the
have part
box.
of him. Yeah, I got
Well,
the box.
so let's talk. There's three names I want to bring up because
Yeah, sure.
let's go with the first one being Joe Pass. So obviously Virtuoso 1 and 2 are, are landmark records and everybody refers to them and all that. How, if at all, did that affect your solo playing? And Joe in general, how has he affected your playing?
Well, I mean, I think that Joe, in jazz, as you know, Bob, there's a lineage. There's a lineage
Hmm.
of players, and I think Joe set a really high bar. For me, I just feel like I absorbed so much from osmosis. I mean, I used to see Joe when he came to town, but listening to the recordings and really absorbing a lot of that. Just, I mean, I don't know. Now I'm sort of at a loss of words, but I feel like, both in terms of, obviously Joe's technique, and Joe had studied classical guitar as well. So I think
Right.
his technique, just in terms of what he was able to do technically, was astonishing. But it was also the swing. I think for me in Joe's playing, one of the things that really always knocked me out was his sense of swing, which was just so
Hmm.
happening,
Yeah.
just so amazing. And so I think the overall musicality of everything that he did, and how he would take a piece and it would have, would have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It was always so beautifully structured. And I think I absorbed a lot of that into my playing. Obviously, I'm younger and I had different influences than Joe, but I also had some of the same influences, and I had him as an influence. And
Hmm.
so I think you absorb that. Henry Johnson was recently out in the Bay Area, and we were conducting a guitar intensive together. We were sharing the uh, teaching duties, and Henry had a great way of putting it. He said that it's imitation, assimilation, innovation, and I really like that. And
Yeah, I like that. So say
I
that
like to
again.
tell
I
that to
want to
my
write what.
conservatory students too. But I mean, for me, that's what it's about. And so, yeah, so first you imitate, then you completely assimilate, and then you take it somewhere new, hopefully, because you don't want to be a clone.
No, I like that. I like something that Joe DiOrio said in one of his videos. He said that he caught Joe playing a first position D chord, and he said, how can the great Joe Pass play a first position D chord? And Joe's answer was, it's there, it's the right sound, I'm playing it, you know.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can get into a thing where if you're too self-conscious about what you do, that gets in the way of the music.
so in your own playing, do you find you have bits of his playing in things that you do on a regular
I think
basis?
so. I think so. But again, it's become, I think I've taken it and I've done my own thing with it, if you will. So I think certainly there are certain times when I'll go into a walking baseline thing, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe, you know, maybe there's a Joe Passian kind of thing that I've started, but then I will usually take it somewhere differently, maybe harmonically, maybe rhythmically. So I think, like I said, it's become so absorbed into my musical consciousness, if you will, Bob, that it just sort of spills out. But it's just like Wes has, when I'm playing single line stuff. Wes has been a huge influence, but I don't sound like Wes. But you can hear the influence, if that makes sense.
Your bass lines are much more I'm going to say this all wrong, but your bass lines are much more I'm trying not to say the word modern, because you do some things with your bass lines, like you do. I was watching you had like a pull off, on one of your tunes, hammer on the pull off, and
Yeah,
one of your
yeah,
things, and I'm going, that's not something I would normally, and I'm not trying to imitate or assimilate or anything like that, but that's not something I would normally hear. And I thought, wow, because you have a real modern style. I'll get into
yeah.
that in a minute. So here's another guy who plays a lot of solo guitar, and I know you know Martin Taylor.
Yeah, I toured. As a matter of fact, Martin and I did some shows together. We toured together. I don't know, maybe 5, 10 years ago. We did a bunch of shows together.
Right.
So yeah, I know Martin. And he's wonderful player.
He's another guy that's totally absorbed the solo guitar thing. And the last one I was gonna bring up was Pat Martino. The reason I'm bringing up Pat Martino is in your playing, I hear a lot of that heavy dynamic stuff that Pat did. I mean, you do it differently. You're not the same, but I is it did that. Are you aware of that? Is that
Oh,
anything that?
absolutely. Well, Pat has been a big influence on me. As a matter of fact, and hopefully it'll come around again. But I was invited to share a bill with Pat up in Seattle for a few shows a few years ago, and I couldn't do it because I was in Europe. I mean, I knew
Mhm.
the routing wouldn't work, so I was bummed, really bummed. But I did get to meet him, and at another time, and I'm hoping maybe that'll come around again. But Yeah, Pat. I've transcribed a lot of Pat's stuff because his dense, his dense eighth note lines and all the chromaticism in his
Hmm.
playing has really impacted me. Not so much for solo, obviously for single line for my group playing, but I have, I can really hear his influence in my playing in terms of chromatic ideas and a certain way of moving. And also, Pat basically has a sort of convert to minor concept in terms of how he looks at the guitar, and that makes sense to me. And it's not the only way I see the guitar, but it's certainly one important way to see it.
He plays with a lot of power.
Yes, it
A
does.
lot of power. And I made a joke to his drummer one night when I saw them play. I said, you got your hands full, don't you? and he said, oh yeah. Because once Pat, he plays the 412 cabinet when he was playing.
Right.
A small solid state, punchy amplifier on a 412. And that thing just came at you like a ton of bricks and all of that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I see some of the things that you do are very, very assertive. Let's call it not aggressive, but assertive. And so you're aware of that you have
I think so. Well, again, I
you're a
think it's,
strong player.
thank you, Bob. I think it's something that I don't think about. It's not like I go on stage and say, "Oh, I'm going to play assertively." It's it's sometimes, I also love to get into the beauty of a great ballad,
Right.
and play more lushly and with more space and more delicacy. But I mean, I grew up on the East Coast. I'm kind of an intense person, and I think that intensity comes out in my playing. Yeah,
I love it.
exactly.
I love it. You really run the gamut in your dynamics and the harmony and your lines. I mean, you're one hell of a player. I mean, you are one hell, and the world knows it. I mean, it's not like I'm letting this out of the bag. I mean, the reviews you've gotten and the people that talk about you and the things that you've done, your accomplishments speak for themselves. So I got a couple more for you here.
Yeah,
So grab your guitar if you don't mind.
yeah, sure.
I'm gonna and this is a question I've asked a lot of people lately, and I kind of like it. So if you were to say something or play something that's indicative of Mimi Fox's style, someone said, "Well, what's the style of Mimi Fox? What does she do? What is her thing? I mean, as opposed to, well, she sounds like Wes, or she sounds like this, or she sounds like that."
You
What?
know why I know this? The only reason I know this is because my students who have copped a lot of my stuff, they play it back for me. And I'm going to do
Ah,
something that I apparently do a lot, which is over a D minor. Let's say we have a 2-5-1, right?
yeah.
So I had,
The plus five.
so I apparently I take the D minor.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
apparently that's a chordal thing that I do. So I'll be in the middle of a piece and I put it in. So so let's see.
Oh, geez. You just did that little movement, and it was so freaking elegant. It's beautiful. Yeah, 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 yeah. So tell us what you're doing there.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
See there, I put it. I was trying to get to it. So if I was at that point in the tune, it would be right there.
Right,
So, but this was that was just double stops. I mean,
right.
that just sixths or thirds.
But you did a little figure in there with it, didn't you? Didn't I
I
see
did
something
go.
else?
Well, let's see. Uh,
Yeah, right. That's what it was.
so there,
Right,
I did a more of a classical thing. I
right.
think again, if you're asking me to sort of play my own stuff, I have to play a little, and then it will come out
Yeah.
as I'm naturally doing it. So that's something. But I mean, I guess the other thing that I think is indicative of my playing is sometimes how I use harmonics, in a piece,
Mhm.
that I will put it out. So, for example, like something like,
Oh, wow. That was
so there, those were artificial harmonics as part of it, but sometimes I use naturally occurring harmonics, like something like,
right.
so there I was using it as like a B flat altered, and so those were the naturally occurring ones. So I think that that's something that people have noticed. But I also think the observations that you made about my assertiveness, my baseline, I think those are probably part of a stylistic thing that I have too.
Just comes out of you. And
Yeah, I mean, it's just a natural. It comes out of me naturally, but it's a gazillion years of practicing.
sure. So like you say you do a lot of West single line stuff, and you've incorporated
Mhm.
that into your own style. How would your style and Wes's style be similar, and how would they be different approaching the same kind of thing?
Well, I'm going to try to take Wes and then put my own spin. So let's say I'm playing a blues. It's a blues of mine called Buddy's Blues. Okay, so
Right.
that's it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So you can hear the Wes influence in that, but then when I go into a solo, I might play.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So maybe I'll do some octave stuff. So I'm paying respect to Wes, but then I might take it somewhere different. So, I mean, I think, how is it the same? Well, it's obviously inspired by Wes in
Sure.
terms of the head. And then maybe, like I said, maybe I'll do some octaves, but Wes was Wes.
Wes.
And that's about all that she has to say about that. So
Well,
I just do my best. I just do my best to be Mimi, but
yeah,
Wes
well,
was Wes.
no, you have accomplished Mimi. So let me just see what we got here. So you've got courses on True Fire.
Yes, in fact, they just released a new one. It's kind of interesting that we are doing this interview today, Bob, because one of the new ones that, well, I guess it's on pre-order. I
Mhm.
don't know if they've officially launched it yet, but it's called My Guitar Heroes, and it was really fun for me because unlike all of the more traditional educational things that I've done with them, this was, and actually they're not all guitarists. So I did Wes, I did Pat Martino, I did Joe Beam to talk
Mm,
about compositions, and
sure.
then I did Coltrane and Charlie Parker, who have also been huge influences. And so I got to talk about what inspired me, how they inspired me, what I learned, and then I play one of my original pieces, and then get to exemplify, in both a composition and a playing sense, you know, the correlation and how how it ties in.
So you got a whole lot of things going on. You're doing. I mean, there's a lot of players. They have one guitar. They've got their jazz box, and that's what they play. They play bop or hard bop or something like that. You have more eclecticism in it than the average bear for sure, which is really cool. So you got the electric thing going on. You got the acoustic thing going on. You got the organ trio thing going on. You got the solo guitar, and you don't just like wave your hanky at it. You're immersed in this stuff, and you got it. Like some people say,
I try to only wave my hanky, Bob, if I'm a damsel in distress. Otherwise, I will not wave my hanky for anybody.
you get my point. You get my
I
point.
do. I do.
You're opening the Monterey, or you're playing in the Monterey Jazz Festival later this
Yeah,
month.
next a week from this Friday, Actually, yeah, and my organ trio is actually kicking off. We're the first thing. We're opening it up.
How
So
freaking cool is that?
well, it is freaking cool. It's also being they chose our set as one of the sets as Real Jazz Sirius XM
Yeah,
is live streaming.
I love it. I think that's great. So you got
Yeah.
True Fire. You got what's your latest record? What are
Well,
we?
my record before the pandemic was my acoustic project, This Bird Still Flies,
Yeah,
and so that is my. I had, you know, I like all musicians. I had a whole bunch of tour dates that, you know, fell
got
away
blown up.
because of the pandemic. But so I'm still performing. You know, those some of the pieces that I wrote for that, and some of the, you know. So I have that. I'm hoping to record with this organ trio that I have. That we've done a few big shows, and we're going to probably go into the studio at some point soon. So that's down the
That's
line because
really
I've
cool.
recorded. I had the opportunity when I was with this one record label in 1998 to record with an organ trio, and I scraped the bottom of the barrel and I found Joey DiFrancesco
Oh,
just
well,
sort of,
hey, you got,
you do what you
sometimes you
can.
got to slum it sometimes, you just can't help it.
Right, but it's been a while since so even though I play with organ trio a lot locally when I'm in town, uh, and I've done it some on the road, but that is I'm really looking forward to actually recording with my own group and doing some of my own compositions that are going to be, I think, kind of cool. So I know it's funny. I know that the people in like Acoustic Guitar Magazine and in that world, the acoustic guitar world,
Yeah, because you're playing
they're
a
going
tail.
to be bummed because they're going to want another acoustic project. And already now I'm going on and I'm not just doing a group thing, but I'm doing a B3. It's like, is the girl schizophrenic? No, these are all just different parts of.
I love it. I love that. The bottom line on this is that I'm so glad that you came to talk to us today. The last thing that I was going to ask you, is there something, or is there a question you've never been asked in any of your interviews that you go, why doesn't anybody, well, is there anything that you
What I want to thank you for, Bob, in addition to the fact that it's been a pleasure, and I too, I feel like we had a really nice connection right off the bat. But I'm really glad that you didn't ask me because this question, it feels so hoary, HOAR. It's overdone, which is what's it like to be a woman in jazz? And I am so glad that you did not ask me that because I could write a book. I could go on and on and on about stuff, or I could say this, or I could say nothing. But it gets old having to answer that because, after all, for one thing, I'm just one woman, so I can't speak for every woman in jazz and all of their experiences. But it also, at some point, makes me feel as if I'm like in a zoo, like being observed. And I know that that's not what interviewers are trying to give me an opportunity to share, because certainly I've had my hurdles over the years. But it's really nice for me to just talk one on one with another player and talk about what I love to do, and have that be, it's not particularly relevant to our conversation. I mean, obviously, who I am as a human being comes out in my music, and being a woman is part of that. But as Jimmy Bruno and I talked about this once. He said, Mimi, he said, you're a great player. The fact that you're a woman, he said, I've heard women that play very, assertively, and I've heard guys that play much more mellow. He said, it has nothing to do with that. And it's pretty true when you think about it, but you can get pigeonholed, I guess. And so I'm just glad that you didn't ask that question, because it's much more fun for me not to get into the whole, socio-political thing. After all, I'm just a little Jewish girl from Queens. I don't want to get into all of that stuff. I'd rather talk about music.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, you know what, Bob? That was the only response to my soliloquy that you could have possibly given. That was enough said. Enough said, Bob.
Let me leave it there.
I thank you, Bob. I mean, this has just been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun. So I'm Bob Baker with Jazz Guitar Today. We're here with Mimi Fox, and God bless you, man. You tear it up. You tear it up, and I love what you're doing. I mean, I'm not just saying it. I don't interview people unless I really dig their playing. So, I mean, I only want to talk to people that I really, really respect and deserve the shine, the light to be shined down in this light anyway, a little differently. And you are incredible. I really
Wow,
mean
thank
that.
you.
You're incredible, and whatever we can do to keep that light shining, without trying to sound like we do anything, but you know what I'm saying, we're gonna keep doing that.
I
So,
hear you. I'm very humbled by this opportunity, and thank
oh,
you.
and I thank you again. So it's Bob Baker with Mimi Fox. We appreciate you so much. Have a wonderful day, and bye for now.
Live long and prosper.
Oh yeah, that too. See you. Bye bye.
Yeah.